Welcome to the Hoporenkv Native American Podcast, where we discuss focused topics within tribal housing and self-determination. I'm Brooke Warrington, the Training and Development Specialist here at the Seminole Tribe of Florida Native Learning Center. Here with me is our Training and Development Coordinator, Brianna Birch. And we have some special guests today. Our episode is going to feature Moriah McGill, who's Deputy Director of Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority. And we also have Joseph Diehl, who is Managing Director of Diehl Co. LLC Management Consultants. Thank you so much for joining us today, you guys. First, could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourselves and maybe how you two first met and kind of started working together?
Sure. My recollection, when I met Moriah, she was sitting in one of my classes and she was probably the only one asking questions, actually. And so she came up afterwards and said, "Hey, can we meet with you after this presentation and pick your brain? I want to learn everything you know." And so I said, sure. And from then on, I've been following her on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I really enjoyed working with her. We gave a presentation on this topic in May at the National American Indian Housing Council conference. And so we're somewhat up to date, although technology is changing. Well, that's how we met, and we've been good friends since. And Moriah, you can add anything that I missed?
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to not only be here today, but to be with my friend Joe. For knowing him not only in tribal housing, but getting to know his brain, his personality, being able to learn about preventing burnout and really inspiring our staff has been a really wonderful experience. And I'm just excited to be here today and grateful that we can continue on this super important topic for tribes throughout the nation.
That's so nice and so lovely that you all share that. Just a question for both of you. You both can answer. I'll give you both time to answer, but what are both of your own experiences with raising funds for housing programs?
Well, that's a great question. And I kind of go back to before any of you were born, like in the early 1990s, I started working for a nonprofit, and the chairman of the board said, "Hey, Joe, you need to write grants." I go, "Now, what's that?" And so that launched me on a journey. And that was an organization that was actually working with pension funds. It was a nonprofit, but the for-profit pension funds wanted to invest in housing, and there was no mechanism to really do that. So we wrote grants to try to get foundations and corporate givers to say, "Hey, why can't the rich people of the world invest in affordable housing too?" And so that really started me off. And then again, I sort of changed my approach over time. I used to write grants to everyone. It took up all my time, right? And about 10% of them would work, and the rest of them not. And so then it's okay, trial and error is working out now. And so that's really how I got started. And then now I'm very targeted. I'm very relationship based. I'm very much trying to convince the people with the money to share it with those that do not have. I'll let Moriah talk.
Great. So I feel like when people get into grant writing, it's because they love to persuade people. And I was one of those people as well. I started here at Northern Circle back in 2014 as the receptionist. And that's where I gained a lot of my knowledge about the community, because I was the first one on the phone, whether it was talking to individuals about their current situation, right? Trying to do that motivational interviewing to figure out what program to send them to, or, having conversations with partners that were trying to reach the executive director. So it was like the front line of learning where the gaps are in the programming. So as I kind of worked into my career, I had the great opportunity of learning from my mentor, Darlene Tooley, who was, the founder of Northern Circle. And she taught me everything she could about grant writing and housing development. So I took what I like to do is creative writing. I do poetry. I write kids' poems and stories for my own children. And I was like, okay, so I like to argue. I like to persuade people. I like to be creative. And Darlene taught me how to do it for money. So, all those things put together. And just like Joe, it's kind of like throwing a dart and seeing what's going to stick. Now it's more of like a self competition. Like I got an ICDBG last summer. Can I get 2 this year? Right. And I strive to be excellent at what I do. And now teaching our team internally on how to do grant writing, it's so cool. And there's something so special about being it almost feels like Bob Ross, painting the picture for funders who may have never, ever stepped foot on a reservation, to say, start with your why and say, here's what we need, here's why we need it, and here's how we're going to do it. So I love it. I wouldn't want to do anything else.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. I love that. So the reason that we have you on the show today is this past the end of May, I believe. Yeah, very end of May. All of us were at the NAIHC annual conference, and you two did an incredible session about raising funding for housing. I was in the room. It was fantastic. And so we wanted to have you on the show so that anyone who, wasn't able to go to the conference, anybody who doesn't have access to these kind of creative solutions that y'all had shared, we can get the word out to some more folks, some more people in Indian country who could, use that creative spirit, that ingenuity. So just like in your presentation, you had started with the why, but you also said to think outside the box. So in the context of tribal economic development, what does thinking outside of the box mean? Why is that so crucial right now?
Well, that's a great question. And I think, again, when you go back to what makes companies successful, right? You look at, for example, Apple. They came out with a lot of digital type products that didn't work out, but they landed on the iPhone, and all of a sudden, they're a $1 billion company. So I guess the same kind of thing works with tribes. Like if you can find a way where those with money can do business on the reservation, whether it be data centers, the cloud is expanding at such an exponential rate right now with AI. They need more and more of these data centers, and they basically have a blank check, right, to write to a tribe to put up a data center, and it's just a box, right? It's a big warehouse with a bunch of computers, air cooled at the top, and 3 or 4 people working there just to keep all the machinery running. But we think the cloud is up here somewhere, but it's not. It's in the rural areas where the building costs are less. There's energy available, and so that's just one example. We have a tribe here in the Northwest that has put on their reservation a Home Depot and a Cabela's, right? And even though they're rural, those stores are busy all the time. They also put up a gaming facility about 10 years ago, and they have never had a vacancy in their hotel since then, right, on the weekends. During the week, it's a little slow, I'll admit. But, a lot of people say, well, if we can't get a federal housing grant, then we're out of business or whatever. That's not true. Now, a lot of times the tribe will say, well, you folks are housing, and we have to care about our members' economic situation, but housing is integral to someone's worth as a person, right? If you have safe, clean, and affordable housing, then whether the source of that comes from a IHBG grant or from an energy grant or a corporation that says, hey, we're going to build a big box on a 99-year lease. You can have the box after 99 years, and you just sit there and collect a check every month. That's how to build your basic economy at the tribe. I'll let Moriah weigh in because By the way, I do like to talk a lot. I don't know why that is. I think lack of attention at home. Don't tell
You're
my wife.
just passionate. That's it. You're just passionate.
And that's perfect for a podcast, so keep it coming.
Okay, I'll calm down.
Joe. Yeah, so one of the things that we like to kind of encourage other tribes, specifically TDHEs, is to find means of doing economic development internally, right? As tribes, they have the opportunity to expand their economic development through gaming, through business development, right? Like Joe said, maybe even having a big box on their property with a 99-year lease. And we sometimes think that TDHEs don't have that same element of being able to expand on economic development. But what I like to encourage folks is focus on what you're excellent at, right? Maybe you have a maintenance crew that is excellent at turning over a vacant unit rehabilitation project. If they're excellent at that, find ways in which you can use them either on the reservation or off the reservation as like a general force account crew, right? And have that be a means of economic development. And maybe it might even turn out to be that you now have a general contractor on your team and you're serving as a full developer with a construction arm. Another thing that TDHEs can also consider is if you've been a housing director and you got NAHASDA down, find ways to offer your services through technical assistance. Right? There are ways in which you can support other tribes. We're doing it now here at Northern Circle. We serve as a technical assistance provider through the state of California in the Tribal Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program. And we support individual grantees, tribal grantees throughout the state in expanding their homelessness programs. But then also, like yesterday, I did a training on how to write grants. And it's supporting the tribes where they're at. So find what you're excellent at and see if there's a way to capitalize so that you can self-sustain. One of the things that I think we're missing in a lot of our grants is the ability to celebrate our team and like do cake or do a raffle prize at a staff meeting or have food. And there's not grants that cover that. But if you're excellent at something and you start capitalizing on that and create your own pots of money, you can empower your team to do incredible things and then celebrate them on that. So there's both the globally on the tribal side and then more locally at either the housing department or the TDHE.
And let me piggyback on that. Again, a Northwest tribe on the coast of the Pacific Ocean set up a hotel, and I was like, no one's going to go to this hotel. There's nothing out there, and it's like booked all the time because it's a retreat center. There are no telephones and there are no televisions in the hotel. You can hear the waves hitting on the beach right below the hotel. It's like, it's a gold mine, and people didn't really understand that at first. And again, it's sort of like, you got to think outside the box. Some things may not work, right? You may have a windy part of the land on your reservation, and you say, well, that's kind of worthless land. We can't grow crops on it or anything. But how about wind energy? There's companies that will come in and build that stuff and allow you to draw down the power or sell it back to the grid, right? So you got to think outside the box. You got to get usually tribal council to sign off on stuff like that. But just because you're independent in housing doesn't mean you can't think outside the box.
Thank you both so much for expanding on that. Joe, you got to get me the information to that hotel. So I can
Of course.
go. Joe, you did kind of touch on funds and writing checks. You both really touched on that area, but I just want to know, why is it dangerous for tribal economic development to rely on one or two sources of funds, investments, and capitals? And what are the risks associated with such a limited approach?
I mean, basically, I touched on it a little bit in that, a lot of times you're throwing darts against a wall and you're trying to see what sticks, right? And so it applies to grant writing and fundraising. And, if you don't try it, um, you're not going to find out whether it works or not. I mean, one local tribe, again, I'm more familiar with the Northwest because I live here and I interact with the tribes here in the Northwest. They decided that they wanted to brand themselves, right? And so they really went on a campaign with 30-second television spots, which they paid for. I mean, after midnight, you don't have to pay for them, but basically to talk about their, canoe festival and their new hotel and new casino. And it's a branding thing, right? And so it's now a household word. I mean, people even couldn't pronounce the tribe sometimes here in the Seattle area, but now it's like, wow, we got to check this out, And so that's the kind of thing where you try a bunch of things. I think they've been very, very successful, and I've talked to them about, when I give trainings, I offered the housing department. I'll give you free trainings, as many as you want, because I want to reward your staff. We're doing such great things. And they said, well, our staff is already pretty motivated, Joe. But if you can pump them up higher, let's go for it. So, just add to that they're, look around, right? Look at what other tribes are doing. Get on Facebook, get on LinkedIn, and see what they're doing. See what the Seminoles are doing. And check it out.
Awesome. So that excellent suggestions and advice for that area with raising capital. You guys also, in your presentation, a big kind of tenet of what you wanted folks to take away from it was to focus on your why. That got brought up earlier. So can you expand on what you mean by that idea for our listeners?
Moriah, go for it.
Right. So when writing a grant or when proposing a project to someone, to investors, it's so important to start with your why, because your why is the heartstrings. Your why is the response, and maybe it's the story of a family reunifying after recovery from substance use disorder, or maybe it's welcoming home a family to a new constructed home that was demolished because of a wildfire, right? It was destroyed. So it's automatically hitting that fish as soon as you set the line. And not only do you start with your why, but you end with it, because you have to remind your reader and the reviewer that this is why we need it. And it's so important for our funders to know what they're giving their money for and how it relates to their vision. All funders have a vision, right? To score highest in an IHBG competitive grant, you're looking at expanding your housing stock, right? So if you want to score the most points, why are you developing those units? Is it because a wildfire came and destroyed 1/3 of your stock? Right? And if that's so, paint that picture. Paint it right at the beginning, because that will remind them, wow, not only does Joe say that he's in line with my vision and what we're looking to award, but now I feel like I can relate to him and I understand and I feel for his community. Now, a lot of the reviewers outside of Indian country, if you write grants or seek philanthropic donations, they may have never walked on a reservation, right? Or their only perception is the big giant casino with their lights on and the flames coming out of the sky and all these incredible things. But they don't realize that, not every tribe is a gaming tribe, and not every gaming tribe lives without any hardships. Right? Even our most successful gaming tribes have members that are experiencing homelessness and they still need support. So starting with that why and painting the picture of your why is going to land you more success than by just saying, I'm Moriah McGill and this is what I do. Start with your why before you even introduce your organization, because that's the most important part. And I learned it from Joe.
And I learned it from Simon Sinek, who did a TEDx talk in Puget Sound. It was quite a long time ago, but it went viral, and
Yeah.
I really, you know, encourage people. I mean, most grants that you read, I was a grant reviewer at one time for the city of Seattle, right? So we would get all these grant applications, and you know, we are a tribally designated housing authority situated in blah blah blah. We have 110 units. It's like I just kept reading on and on, and the next one said. We found this homeless family on the streets of Seattle, and we took them in. We found them shelter, and then here's a video. Click here for the link of them getting the keys to their first apartment. And if you don't cry, there's something wrong with you. So anyway, that's the why. Why are we doing this? We're not doing it because we are a housing authority and we do this and we do that. Nobody cares about that. They don't even care how you do it, right? They care about why you do it. And so I just emphasize that over and over again. I do it in multiple classes. You know, if you're even talking about a sporting event or kids going to college or whatever, you talk about why that's important. Not, you know, how do they get in and, you know, how do they go through the admissions process and how are they going to afford it? Nobody cares about that, really. They want to know that they're going to become a successful doctor or, you know, giving back to society in some way.
One of my favorite icebreakers whenever we have new staff is to have everyone start with their why, right? Go around the room. Why are you in housing? Right? Sometimes we'll find that we're so much more alike than we are different. And a lot of us have our backgrounds painted in the same colors. And, you know, we may have the same familial situations like, oh, I went through that too. Or my mom survived that also, right? And it creates almost that bond right off the beginning. And when you start with your why in a grant, you're bonding to that funder. And you know, it's a wonderful icebreaker. I highly suggest it in your team building meetings. But in any case, you know, start with your why and watch that TED Talk.
I think for,
Excellent.
yeah, and for me, you know, when I was asked that question, you know, 30 years ago or whatever, I would say, um, it was a job I applied for and I got it. It's like, that's not your why. Well, it is my why because I had to support my family and I had no choice, right? It was probably the only job offer I got. But the real why now is I have made a difference in, you know, hundreds of families' lives. And I still get notes in the mail, like little handwritten notes, like this one, right? Thank you for helping me get my first house. It's like, I don't remember doing that, but I guess I did.
I love that for you. And I love that concept. I'm gonna steal that for our next staff meeting. That'll be our icebreaker. What's your why? But can you both just expand a little on the second concept, seek and you shall find?
Seek, and that's a biblical reference that I look at very often because it's like one of those things where if you don't seek, you'll never find, right? So you have to really take the initiative and always have your ears open, your eyes open. Also, I'm good at this, your mouth open, to ask at a reception or a stranger on the street, a person in the elevator, uh, what do you do? And as it turns out, many times it could be the higher power, it could be just coincidence. That person will go, well, you know, I try to find places where I can donate money to really help people find housing. And then I usually say, are you joking? You come to the right guy, finally. But no, it's kind of interesting because you can't sit in your office and cry about your woes, right? Oh, poor me. We don't have enough money to house this family. What are we going to do? You have to, uh, oh, we may start that section over. Well, you may sit in your office and think about, oh, woe is me. I don't have any money. I can't house this family. But, what have you done in the past 24 hours to try to expand your influence? And as I think Moriah agrees with me, that relationships are everything. Once you bring them out to your reservation and you show them the housing, and don't be afraid, show them the housing that's dilapidated.
So to piggyback on what Joe was saying about the seek and you shall find, a lot of research, like you can go to grants.gov and type in keywords, right? Tribal housing or substance use prevention, domestic violence response, and you will get these long lists of potential grants. And what's really cool about like grants.gov is it shows like who the funder is, what the grant is, and if it's open, closed, or when it intends to be open. So I am a big proponent of just keep looking, right? Type in, you may not have this whole idea of what's needed in your community, but maybe just in conversations with tribal council or your recent strategic plan or feedback from community, maybe they'll say, oh, we want a splash pad. So then you look at like water parks, recreation, right? And just dive in that fashion. I think if we only consider these small pockets of money, we will never move quickly. I mean, for some folks, it could take, especially small tribes, it could take 10 years to raise enough IHBG funds to build one house. So you have to be committed to finding those additional funds to support your vision, because if we have 300 people who are in need of housing today, if we don't build 10 houses tomorrow, before we get that money, that waiting list expands even farther, right? The longer we wait doesn't mean that there's going to be less people who are in need of home. There's going to be more, and maybe trifold, maybe double, maybe triple, right? So we have to respond quick and seek and you shall find. Go looking.
And one thing, if you don't mind me adding, is that the people that run these programs that give grants to folks, I don't want to say they want to look good, but they want to really make the biggest impact they can. And if you start with your why and how you're going to change the lives of people, your chances of getting that grant have just gone up exponentially. It's unbelievable. And you just, again, sort of have to, it's not working the system, it's just explaining what your need is in a way that people can understand from a human point of view, especially with kids, right? A family who's living on the streets of Seattle with 2 teenage children. What's going on there? You got to help them. And so, that's the kind of thing that we're trying to emphasize in Seek and Ye Shall Find, is really, get off your butt, get out there, ask around, and then explain what you're trying to do in terms that don't talk about, the what or the how, but the why. And that really is helpful. And I think in some of the retreats I've done, when I've also piggybacked on what Moriah started to do at her staff retreats, that people will dwell on this, right? It's like, okay, we only have 10 minutes to talk about your why. Oh, wait, I'm not done yet. So people get excited about it, and it's a great icebreaker, but it more is a motivational device, right? Because others who say, well, I just took the next job that came along, are like thinking, wow, this is really a cool job after all.
Thanks so much for expanding upon that. Both of y'all have kind of touched on it a little bit, but that third tenet or concept for being successful in grant and proposal writing that you had included was to build relationships. Is there anything else you want to add to that? I know, Moriah, you had kind of talked about forming that bond through telling your why and your writing. And Joseph, you had talked about, taking folks out to the reservation, showing them, getting acquainted. Was there more to that idea than what you've already said?
I love this part because this is my favorite part of learning about new grants and new funding sources. It's the networks. Even like Joe and I, we didn't know each other prior to me attending his session. And now we've created this incredible partnership and we're working together in different arenas. And conferences are like a breeding ground of relationship building, right? When you go to places, even just being in an elevator, I can't even tell you how many times I introduced myself to anyone walking into the elevator in LA. And I said, I started with my why, and I said, like, I'm here because we're working to develop a 15-unit elder village, and we're seeking additional funding sources and contributions to this project so that we can ensure 30 elders have a safe place to live at night and spend their final days. And 9 times out of 10, some of the folks are like, oh my gosh, we have an elder village. Here's a card. Let me connect you to X. And one thing, I explained this in my training yesterday, anytime you get a business card, whether it's from, someone in a hotel or going to the conference, you write a note on the business card. Right? If you came to our session, maybe you start with your why on this business card. And you knew that if you wanted to learn more about what that means or how to expand on your narrative for your next grant, you can reach out to Mo and Joe, right? And you write what you need on these business cards. And then when you meet someone, kind of vice versa, is if someone asks you a question and they ask for your business card, write it for them. Right? Maybe I would write support with their Indian housing plan for FY 2526, right? And then I get, please call me, because I can't tell you how many times early in my career I got a business card and I said, who is this? And you're missing out. You can miss out on an incredible relationship. I had a call a couple days ago with a potential, I thought it was just an introductory email, and it turned into a $90,000 conversation. I had no idea there was any money included in it at all. But because we were talking about what our organization does, what their organization does, we realized that our visions are in line. We have 2 capacity grants that are going to be coming in. So it's like, expand your network, start with your why, and know that when you give your business card, that can lead to success, not just for your organization, but you're supporting their organization too, because you're reciprocating that relationship.
And that's a good point in terms of when you're at a conference and let's say the opening reception, right? You walk into a room and there's 400 people, 90% of them you've never met before. So when I give my networking class to people, I try to train them on, okay, the dirty dozen. What are the dirty dozen, right? So it's the 12 things you must do in order to raise money in housing, right? And that is to work the room. You got to spend not more than a minute, maybe a minute and 30 seconds with each person. You got to know when to cut them off. You need to exchange business cards and you need to move on. And so I challenge people when I give a talk and then there's a reception that night, I want all of you to work that room. And then the people are flabbergasted. It's like, I just met 20 people that came up and gave me their card. What happened? Well, they attended my class. And they also broke out of this introvert thing, right? So one of the things Moriah and I do is like, can we get someone to stand up and tell us your elevator speech? And a young woman did do that at our last training, and it was brilliant. I mean, she had it down, right? And so you only have probably, 45 seconds in an elevator to tell them what you do and why you do it. And so it's one of the things that has paid off a lot. I think in the long run for me, I've developed close friendships, business relationships with people that I met at like a dinner party. It's like, I don't even know who these people are. They're friends of the host, right? And it's like, oh, I think we can help you folks in housing. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. But you have to also write to them. And one of the things I like too, I like to show examples of things, is like this personal note that I received. It's nothing like a handwritten note. I mean, I typically will post them on my wall, right? It's like, oh, thank you so much for your card of concern. So I wrote them a little note to say, I'm very worried about you. I'm praying for you. I wish you the best. And they wrote a handwritten note back to me. And that's how you build relationships. It's on empathy. And it's that you really care about somebody else. And there's many people who I get this every day, like 4 calls a day. They're scams, right? But I even try to talk to them. Like, tell me why you took this job. What job? Why are you calling a bunch of people, 100, 200 people a day? What do you get out of this? And they go, well, I have to pay my rent and blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, there's other ways to make money. And so it's kind of fun in a way. And another way, it's like it's humanity, right? We're all, after the pandemic, isolated. We're in little tiny silos. And we sit there at night and cry sometimes, right? And we don't have to, it's time to get out again and be kind to each other.
As somebody that was a telemarketer for 2 years and supported myself in college doing that, I appreciate that you're kind and ask questions, because a lot of times it is just young folks or somebody down on their luck where that was the job that was available and you needed money.
And
So
some of them
I
really
appreciate
need,
that note.
yeah, some of them really need training. It's like, okay, do you really believe in this product you're trying to sell? Oh, yeah, yeah. I have it myself. It's wonderful. I go, well, that's what you need to say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I try to,
absolutely.
give you a long spiel that you can obviously tell they're reading it. I go, knock off the reading. It's not going to work out.
Drop the script.
Uh,
So we can shift. What are some ways that our listeners could make sure that funders are a good fit for their needs? That was another big part that you guys explored in your presentation.
I mean, for me, it's all about research, right? And there's so many opportunities now just to use AI. If you've got Google and you start every search with AI, you'll find a lot of information that you're looking for. Unfortunately, what AI does is it pulls from every source it can, right? And sometimes the sources are either what they call fake news or false. So you have to be kind of careful. But there are a number of organizations that have subscriptions. Um, let's see, I think it's called Candid. I have a subscription to that. Um, it used to be called Funding Directory Online or Foundation Directory Online, and then the company called Candid bought it. But there are 367,000 foundations in the United States only, right, that give grants to nonprofits and to tribes and other great causes. And so I guess matching those up instead of throwing, darts against a wall, especially where your staffing is short, you don't have really time to be trying everything. Be very, very targeted. And sometimes it starts with a phone call if you can reach the foundation. So the foundation, would get 100 calls a day if they left their phone number on there. So they typically do not. But do things like look through their board of directors, right? If there's a tribal member, give them a call, right? You can find out through Google or other sources how to probably get their cell phone number, right? And so you don't want to be intrusive or invasive, but you do want to kind of be aggressive on finding the right fit in advance. Moriah is really very, very good at that, and she is not going to waste her time at throwing a bunch of darts and hope they hit the target.
Yeah, I will add I love coalition, like joining coalitions. Whether it's like the California Coalition for Rural Housing, if there's a homelessness correlation in your community, you can find like-minded people and you can join them. And I'm a firm believer of being a forever learner, right? Sometimes you just sit there and listen to someone give their success story, and take notes when they're giving the list of funders. Some of the most success I've seen in grants has been just because I'm reaching out to my network and saying, hey, what did you use for your project? What funding sources did you include, right? You can learn from listening in to people's success stories, subscribing to NIAC, subscribing to HUD, subscribing to a coalition. There's so many different ways, and if you're part of those groups or memberships, you're already like thinking that you're like-minded. Like Joe said, research. I think you don't want to waste your time. So if there's a funding source that automatically says, like it's completely against your vision, don't waste your time. You're not going to change their mind. You're not going to change what a philanthropic donator is set on awarding. So just maybe switch gears. But absolutely do your research, ask your network. Have you applied for grant X, Y, and Z? Oh, no, I haven't, but I really want to apply for that funding source. Maybe it's worth the try, right? So you can almost like hiring new staff, check their references. See if they have on their website a list of recent projects. If you don't see a tribal project on there, decide, is it worth fighting with the agency for a tribe's right to apply for this funding source? Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it's worth your time to say, you're creating this box, open it up, because you're missing a huge population of people. But sometimes your project just doesn't have that time. So you have to weigh those options. But check your references, check the project list, and don't forget to do your research on if your project and your vision is in line with the funding agency.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. You guys are definitely experts. But I have like a 3-in-1, I would say. I feel like you kind of touched on the first one, but what are some other recommendations you would make for preparing a grant proposal? And then can you tell us what is the most often overlooked aspect of a particular grant proposal? And let's say I'm trying to prepare a grant. How do I make sure that I'm not overlooked?
Joe, I can tackle the preparing piece. It was one of the things I actually taught about yesterday with a tribe locally. We always think of who, what, when, where, why, but don't forget how, right? So on my board, I had put all the who, what, when, where, why, and we just went around the room. What's a need in the community? Someone had said, oh, we need extra heavy equipment so that we can expand the fire lane. So I wrote that down on what. And then someone else said that we need domestic violence prevention measures within community. So I wrote that down, right? And we just went around the room and then expanded. We already had the what, where, right? And we pinpointed, are we doing the reservation? Are we doing the county? So it's doing those planning sessions, not only with your staff, not only with your team, but get community involved, right? Do those need assessment studies. If you're going to apply for a grant, data. And if you're not already collecting data, you need to start today, right? Sometimes it's not just the why, but it's the why plus justification, right? It's showing that 1 in 3 domestic violence victims go unreported. Boom, right? It's showing that you increase the rates of family reunification if you can have stable housing for longer than 6 months, right? It's creating those data points to support you. So not only am I saying, bring your team in, bring community in, have that data, and then make sure you give yourself enough time. As a person who's been doing grants for a little while now, I am really good on pressure, but that's if I have all of my ducks in a row. If you need to collect data, if you need to do community engagement, give yourself the time that you need. Give yourself the time that a reviewer, a colleague, Joe, myself, right, a friend in your network, a staff person who's really excellent at spelling and grammar, have them enough time to review and have your numbers checked. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen grants where their budget looks beautiful, but they didn't drop their formula down one more box. So now they're over budget, right? If you don't adjust your formula when you add new line items, your totals aren't going to match. So it's having those people to support you in preparing those budgets, preparing those narratives.
Right. And as a former grant reviewer, I can tell you that what the officials of the organization give the reviewer is this, right? It's like a clipboard, and they say, okay, we have the 15 things that we ask every potential grantee to explain. And so what do? We have a scale of 1 to 5, and we rate the response to each answer, right? So let's say your staff overlooked answering number 6 appropriately. You get a 0 for that. Sorry about that. And that could take you out of the competition. So the key, in my opinion, is not only do everything that Moriah said, but also when you're filling out a grant application, to make sure everything is answered appropriately in the way that they want you to answer it. If you don't know how they want you to answer it, call them up or send them an email and say, we don't understand question number 6. What do you mean about past history? We've never done this program before. And they'll say, well, if you haven't worked in this area before, you should say this, that, or the other thing, or how have your enrolled members, taken advantage of other programs in the community or something like that. And so then it goes up the ladder, right? And then the folks that, let's say it's a family foundation, Uncle Charlie died with $1 billion, and they decided to put that money aside and give the revenues from that, which is usually stocks and bonds, which, by the way, have gone up dramatically since the year 2000. We've been on sort of a tear. There's been a few bumps, but the chart's going like this. They need to give away that money, right? And so what they're going to look at is what my recommendation says as a reviewer, which is basically I just copy what Moriah said is her why. That's all it takes, right? And all of a sudden, they're out visiting your tribe. They're talking to residents, which is okay, by the way. And so Moriah might share a little bit on that. Moriah, what do you think about the grantor, the potential grantor talking to your residents?
I love it because, that's maintenance and residents. Those are like the front lines, right? They understand. And sometimes we have to be humbled by those raw comments and to get better, right? Sometimes we need to hear the raw truth, not the sugar coated, because you don't know what you don't know until you know. Right? Maybe there's a capacity issue and our residents are feeling as if they're not getting the support into home ownership, right? Out of affordable housing and into home ownership. That's a data point for us now. Now we know that we can seek a residence opportunity and self-sufficiency grant to hire another person so that we can better assist our tribal members from being in a rental unit and transitioning to homeownership. I love anytime funders come out. Anytime I meet someone in my network that could be a funder or works really closely with a funder, even that conversation I had yesterday, we're planning on them to come out and visit us. Right? Oh, you're in Sacramento? Our 2 tribes in Butte County are only about an hour away. And if you have an extra day, I'd love to take you out and show you our most recent project. Right? And here's how, if you fund us tomorrow, here's how we can utilize those funds in this community. So have the funders come out. Right? If you're looking on expanding a dilapidated park and replacing it, show that there's no kids out there. right? Show that there's no kids out there because there's no shade cover, and this park was put in the 1980s, and the kids aren't utilizing it. Show them that. Show them that families may be living in substandard trailers or in storage containers. They have to see that. And it's not only our funders, but it's our local leaders as well, right? It's the people who write legislation at the state level and can be in charge of that funnel of funds, right? So show them why it's important that their contributions live in Indian country.
And I worked with a veterans group here in the Northwest, and they were like, well, we have to show them our best side. Right? We have to show them how professional we are. And I said, well, you guys have PTSD? Oh, yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad. It's okay to talk about that. Okay. And how it affects you, how it affects your family, your children, your parents. Just go ahead and talk about it. Oh, we'll never get the grant then. I go, no. You have to lead with your heart and seek and ye shall find.
Definitely brilliant advice, you guys. We really appreciate it. There's an important note that I wanted to make sure we asked about that I think our listeners are definitely going to want to know. So in your presentation, you had challenged us to master the art of housing and work to bring rental income and homeownership into sync with the cost of housing your people. Could you explain kind of like what the principle or philosophy is behind mastering the art of housing in the tribal context?
Joe, do you want to start? And then I'd love to
Sure.
talk about the rental pro forma.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is a neglected factor in Indian country is the management of the housing in a way that really is effective, right? And so one of the things that the local tribes do is they try to bubble up people, right, from the reservation. They give them jobs. You start at a lower level and you move up. But one of the things that they neglect sometimes is to provide the proper avenues for training. And again, it's sort of like one of the things that I found the most informative when I started working in Indian country is just to learn the acronyms. I mean, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of acronyms, and people would say, low-income housing tax credit, that would be great, but then they'd say LIHTC or NIAC or ICBG, they just go on and on with all these, and after the first year, it's like, I don't even know what you're saying. It's a different language. They were like, well, Joe, we've been doing it for 20 years. You haven't been doing it for very long. And so I guess getting the structure, the financing in shape, you need to report properly if you're at the threshold where you have to have an independent CPA firm do a single audit, whatever they call that. You need to make sure that everything is good to go. Moriah, I think you are probably best suited to answer the question because that's what you do.
Yes, I love supporting folks. And it was one of the things that Joe and I really touched on in that session we did in LA was challenging folks to not only master the art of housing, but how do you bring in rental income to support your communities. Now, one of the hard parts is that the programs prior to NAHASDA were not set up to take in much rental income, right? I'm sure many of the listeners can really relate to the idea that $50 a month in rent is common in here in Indian country, right? And if we were to convey all of our units, all of our formula current assisted stock, that means that dollar amount that we get to maintain our units goes away. And if we're only charging $12, $50, $100 a month in rent, while your per unit per year operational costs are going up, you will not sustain, right? So we have to really work with community and start saying, like, how are we breaking the cycles of poverty? Because if we're just keeping people at the poverty level, we are not doing our jobs, right? I felt like the mutual help program that was established prior to NAHASDA, that was set up to keep people low income, right? The whole goal was homeownership, but we were not doing it to its greatest potential, right? We were conveying units and we were seeing our dollar amounts, our allocations getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So what we have to start doing, and I love the Residence Opportunity and Self-Sufficiency Grant through HUD, because it really does offer residents the opportunity to be empowered out of their existing rental properties and into self-sufficiency. And when we think about self-sufficiency, we're thinking about tangible assets, right? We're thinking about something that we can pass down for generations. We're thinking about home ownership. So we have to start working. Do you want to be a renter for your whole life? For some folks, that sounds great. But what do you get out of that? Right? Once you pass, your family may have to leave. And that home where you had birthday parties and, your aunties did that funny thing and we watched our babies learn how to walk, that's no longer that home. That's someone else's opportunity. So by creating the means of self-sufficiency and transitioning into homeownership, you're creating an opportunity where grandma's home becomes my home. And I can have those same memories that she created with us, with my grandchildren. So getting back to that question about, how do we ensure that we're bringing in rental income? We have to empower folks to change their circumstance, right? Are we, what's keeping us here in a rental unit, right? Can we get another job? Are you interested in going back to college? How can we work with you? Or maybe it's someone who is unemployed, but they're unemployed because they have a disability and they don't know how to tackle the disability benefit process. So we need to step in and support people where they're at and empower them. Now, a rental pro forma is a way where you can tangibly show leadership and community and tribal councils, executive councils of like, here's what we're taking in, here's our average rent, here's our per unit per year cost for operations and maintenance, here's what we collect. Are we positive or are we negative? And we can only assume a per unit per year cost is going to go up. So if your rents haven't changed over the last 30 years, I promise you're using more NAHASDA. You're using more NAHASDA to subsidize your programs. Now, if you're only building units on your IHBG and you're not charging sufficient rent, you will not develop homes at the rate in which you need them. Right? We can hardly do that with the rate at which we need them now without bringing in alternative sources. So you have to diversify your portfolio, empower your community, bring in those rental incomes. I'm not saying charge, above fair market rent. No. Charge what to at least cover your costs and do it over time. It's a hard thing to transition, but maybe that $200 rental payment includes a $50 amount that goes towards a social services position, right? Or a residence coordinator, or maybe it's a child care voucher, whatever it might be. But find ways to use that rental income to support your members either where they're at, but make their life better. Make their lives better, and we cannot continue to create these cycles of poverty, but we have to empower people to be their best self. If being a renter is their best self, let's empower them to be the best renter they can. But if their best self is going into home ownership and creating that, let's empower them to do that as well.
And one other thing about that is that to empower folks that are living on your reservation, you need to convince the tribal council and other leaders that when an RFP goes out to build a child care center or a casino or a hotel or anything on the reservation, that the RFP says you will hire X number of our staff and treat them as apprentices and pay them, whatever the market rate is for that, because that's how you build skills in a community, right? And so we have a tribe out here in Eastern Washington who the folks that were apprentices developed a way where they knew how to build these metal roofs on any type of structure, housing, could be an admin building or whatever. And they were able to sell those skills, right, to the area that they were dealing in, which is in Yakima, Washington, right? And so it was brilliant. They were entrepreneurs, effectively, and this adds to what they can pay in rental income and become self-sufficient.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for that excellent information. And thank you both so much for just kind of compacting everything that you have learned just from your time and sharing that with us. We really hope that, we'll be able to get some more information from you both. We hope that this is not the last that we're going to see of you, but do you both have any parting words of wisdom or aspects that you consider key takeaways for our listeners?
I would just like to close with the sentiment that never give up, right? Even if you don't get that grant award this time, try again, right? You consider that grant that wasn't awarded, not as a failure, but as a learning opportunity. Ask for a debrief. Ask the funder to show you exactly where you went wrong. I lost a grant award of $2 million because of 3 words: and at completion. That was it. It was a threshold requirement, and at completion. And I didn't quit. I didn't give up. I'm telling everybody I know that when they apply for that grant, they add "and at completion," because I don't want them to make the same mistakes I did. And I will never, ever, ever make that mistake again. But never give up. Your community knows what they need. Ask them. Ask leaders. Go to your elders and go to your youth, because they are the story keepers. They will tell you the truth. They will tell you what's needed. And oftentimes they can tell you why, if the tribe had tried it once before, why was it not successful? Or why was it? How was it successful? Learn from them. Be committed to being a forever learner. Never give up. Build your relationships and celebrate. Celebrate your success. Celebrate your team. Celebrate your leadership. When something excellent happens, celebrate it. That not only builds morale of your staff, it builds morale of community. Funders like it when you show them what you built with their money. Show them how many backpacks you bought for that back to school event, how many lunches you provided at the big time, how many elders increased accessibility, access into their homes. They like to see that. Celebrate it, and your partners like to see it too. Everyone, we have to be better about celebrating each other, because we are better together, and we're literally all in this together. But thank you so much.
And my closing view would be about attitude, right? Attitude will determine your altitude in all aspects of life, whether it be at home or at work, with friends, in the communities that you live. It's your attitude that makes a difference. And if you're negative and that'll never work, or I'm too tired, or it's 5 o'clock, I've got to go home. Well, maybe some nights you have to work to 2 a.m. and get that grant done, right? And that makes a difference typically. And so, it's not always about the money, it's about people. There are 8 billion people on the planet, of which many are more than willing to help you, but you've never talked to them. And so without getting yourself out there with the right attitude and with the feeling that you should celebrate your successes, you will likely not succeed. And so take our advice. Moriah and I have never lied to you.
Oh, I love it. Thank you guys so much for imparting all this really, really valuable wisdom to our listeners, for taking the time to sit down with us. Joe and Moriah have given us permission to share the presentation that we've been referencing this whole time, folks. So that link will be included in the episode description under the episode resources. So I encourage all of you to download that PDF, look through it. It goes into a lot more detail than we're able to do, on the podcast episode. And if our listeners wanted to connect with you guys, would we be able to include your emails as well? Do you have a preference for how they reach out so that they can build those relationships too?
Call, email, like, share, follow, all of it.
And ditto for me. However they want to
Amazing.
reach out to us, we're here to help.
Fantastic. So their contact is included in the presentation, folks, and then we will also include that with the episode description resources so that you can have quick access. And as you can see, they are absolute, or as you can hear, maybe if you're just listening, but they are an absolute delight. So thank you guys again so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. We're very grateful.
Again, thank you both so much for being here with us. As always, thanks for listening to the Hoporenkv Native American Podcast. If you enjoy our show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also Google Podcasts. Please also visit our website, nativelearningcenter.com, to find information on upcoming webinars and trainings. Also, feel free to contact our website with any episode ideas that you may be interested in us exploring. Please, please, please. Until then, this is the Native Learning Center, and we hope to connect with you again soon. Be sure to come back for more content. Bye, guys.